We have co-hosts with us this evening. So Patricia O'Connor from CD2, she's on the Indivisible Mass Coalition Coordinating Board from the 2nd Congressional. Debbie Hart Klein, also on the coordinating board from the 6th Congressional District. And we have Carla Cooper, who is a leader from Martha's Indivisible and a member of the Feminist Action Team, who is also co-hosting and moderating with us this evening. And Debbie Hart Klein will be monitoring the chat box. So you want to give her your questions, type ask in the box and your question, and she will be collating them and sharing them during the Q&A session. I just want to get my slides up and then share my screen. So hang on with me for a second while I do this. Okay. Going back. All right. And can everybody see that? Just try and make it into a bigger. Okay, so this isn't working exactly. Maybe? Yes. Okay. All right, so just a quick reminder for everybody, our meeting norms, we assume that all on this call have good intentions. Like we said before, please introduce yourselves in the chat. All attendees, we'd like you to remain on mute so we can hear our guest speaker. Ask questions via the chat, type ask before your question. That way the moderator can quickly find them. And then any resources that we share in the chat that have a link, you're welcome to click on them. They'll open in a separate tab. And then after we're done, the links and follow-up information will be sent by email. I'm trying to get to my next slide and it always gets stuck. Sorry about that. All right. Land acknowledgement. So our land acknowledgement was written by Joan Lester, who is a member of Indivisible Mass Coalition's Racial Justice and Equity Team. And what she has written is the following. Whenever you go in America, you are on Indigenous lands. Tonight, we acknowledge that those of us who live in Massachusetts are now on the lands of the Mashpee Wampanoag Nation, the Aquinnah Mashpee tribe, the Nipmuc people, and the native residents of Herring Pond. We recognize their legacy, their ongoing strength, resilience, and their continuing presence. Thank you to Joan Lester for sharing that with us. Also, we just want to once again acknowledge the people of Ukraine. We are thankful and grateful for the people of Ukraine's amazing courage and tremendous fortitude as they continue to fight for their democracy. We stand with them. Very briefly, the agenda, we've gone through introductions. We'll listen to Carrie Baker, give us an update and share her wisdom with us, and then we'll do Q&A with her. And we'll have Carolyn Kimball Katz from Planned Parenthood giving us an update of what's going to happen in Massachusetts, hopefully. And then we'll do brief announcements and conclusion. Once again, if you've just signed in, introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, your group, and your town. And just a reminder, again, ask questions in the chat, type ask. And I am stuck. Okay. Very briefly, for anyone who is new to Indivisible Mass Coalition or is not familiar with us, it is a statewide organization that helps support, coordinate, and connect and amplify the network of indivisible groups throughout Massachusetts in order to promote and support a very participatory democracy. It's committed to ensuring that people are informed, organized, motivated, and have the necessary tools to engage in our democracy. And we also coordinate with national on shared goals for the country's vision of democracy. Please mute yourselves if you are not speaking. Thank you. All right. Hang on one sec. I am just getting coordinated behind the scenes here. Okay. So welcome all there. I want to acknowledge there is one other coordinating board member, I believe, on this call, Rachel Horak. She is from the 8th Congressional District. And did Janine join us, Patricia?
I did not see Janine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so next we'll move on. And here with us this evening to introduce Dr. Carrie Baker is Carla Cooper, who is the leader of Indivisible Mass Coalition on Martha's Vineyard for the past 6 years. She's also a founding member of Indivisible Mass Coalition's Feminist Action Team, and she is chair of the Democratic Council of Martha's Vineyard. Welcome, Carla. Are you there, Carla?
Hey, yes, I was just unmuting.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and welcome, Carrie. Carrie Baker is a lawyer and college professor in gender studies at Smith College. Her research and writing centers on gender and race in law and policy and social movements, focusing in particular on violence against women and reproductive rights. She's the former president of the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Massachusetts and a regular writer and contributing editor at Ms. Magazine. Thank you for joining us, Carrie. Welcome.
Great. Thanks so much, Carla and Deb and Patricia. It's great to be here. So I'm going to just drop in the box a Ms. Magazine article that I published shortly after the Alito opinion dropped. So I am kind of the Ms. point person on abortion, or one of them, and I have read the entire 98-page opinion, and I've talked to a lot of constitutional scholars. Just this afternoon, I was talking to Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of Berkeley Law School. He's a leading constitutional law scholar. And I've really tried to get a deep sense of what this opinion means, not just for abortion rights, but more generally for the rights of, people, women in particular, but people. And I want to talk a little bit about the opinion itself. And it's not the final opinion, but a little about what we know about what might happen in, I guess, 5 or so weeks, or within 5 weeks when the final opinion comes down, and a little bit about what the impact of that opinion might be, and what might happen next as far as reproductive rights more generally, and a little bit at the end about maybe what we can do about it. So as I mentioned, it's a 98-page opinion. It's a draft opinion from last February, so it's not a recent version. Often opinions at the Supreme Court get changed in the course of negotiation, but the fact that Alito is the author of the opinion indicates probably that the Chief Justice is not in the majority, and that the majority is Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett. And that would make sense based on the oral arguments last December. It was very clear from the oral arguments that those 5 were prepared to overturn Roe in toto. The Chief Justice was really not. I mean, he hates abortion, but he was more, well, let's just uphold the 15-week ban, but not overturn Roe, and let's wait till the next case. And so I do think this means the end of Roe. But what's particularly chilling about the Alito draft, which again may not be the final draft, but is probably pretty close, according to the people I've talked with, like Chemerinsky, is the reasoning of the decision, and how broad it is, and how it can impact not only abortion rights, but rights to contraception, rights within the scope of bodily autonomy and privacy that have been guaranteed for the last 50 years, and potentially even other kinds of rights. So just in a nutshell, this is what the argument is. What Alito said is that rights are not protected by the Constitution if they are not explicitly stated there, if they weren't intended to be covered by the framers of the Constitution, in this case, it would be the 14th Amendment, which would be post-Civil War legislators, or if there's a long history and tradition of the right. And so basically what he says is, well, clearly the word abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution. Clearly in 1868 or, after the Civil War, the guys that wrote the 14th Amendment weren't thinking about abortion. And then the third part is, and this is a controversial claim, but he says there's no long history and tradition of the right to abortion. And therefore, it's not protected by the Constitution. And go to the legislature and if you want that right. So, like as I said, he has a very narrow reading of history, but what he does, and it's kind of irritating, the last 30 pages of the decision is literally just a compendium of all the 19th century laws restricting abortion. And he does that to say, look, it's not a long respected right, because look at all these bans that were in existence in the 19th century. And again, historians really contest the history that for most of history, abortion was illegal post-quickening, and that's a whole nother discussion. But so there's that. But the other thing that constitutional law scholars find particularly chilling is the sort of flippant way he disregards precedent. One of the key guiding principles of the Supreme Court is stare decisis, which is Latin for let the decision stand. And the idea is that once the court makes a decision, it should only be overturned if that decision is clearly unreasonable, clearly wrong, if things have changed so significantly that it clearly should no longer be the case, and if nobody's relying on the decision. And he goes through these standards and he makes these arguments that just are very not persuasive. Like he says, Roe is an unreasonable decision. Well, that's just wrong. He says women don't rely on abortion. Well, that's just wrong. And I mean, and again, I have a perspective. You don't have to agree with me, but that's my perspective. And it just, using his reasoning for not following precedent means that they don't have to follow precedent on anything. If they don't agree with something, they don't have to follow precedent. And Irwin today said, he constantly says, a court that doesn't care about precedent, a court that doesn't think it's important to follow precedent. And
now that I think about it, I feel like it's
and so could folks
Sorry, could everybody mute?
Yeah. So that's the decision. And if Roe is overturned, 26 states are certain or likely to criminalize abortion. And we know this, the Guttmacher Institute did a study. 13 states have trigger laws, which are laws that say if Roe's overturned, we immediately ban abortion. Other states have pre-Roe bans still on the books with attorney generals saying they're going to enforce them. Other states have post-Roe bans that have been enjoined by courts, but if Roe's overturned, those injunctions go away. So the estimate is that 26 states are certain or likely to ban. And those states are primarily located in the South and the Midwest. So it's like a T, an upside down T across the country. And if that happens, the average distance that people will have to travel for abortion care in the United States will go from 14 miles to 250 miles. That's assuming abortion remains legal in the other states and accessible and that people can get there. But we know that 75% of people that need abortions, that have abortions in the United States, are low income. They often can't travel. They can't travel for a lot of reasons, but partly they don't have the funds to do it, but they also often already have children. The majority of people getting abortions already have children. They don't have childcare. They often are or can't afford childcare. They're often working at low-wage jobs where they can't just take 5 days off and travel 250 miles and end up in a state with a 2-day waiting period and finally get the care they need and then travel home. So the impact of overturning Roe will be absolutely devastating on the 30 million something people of women of reproductive age in those 26 states that will no longer have access, easy access to abortion. Now, so I can say more about that, and please let me know your questions if you have them. But I want to say a few more things. So I actually talked with Erwin today, but I had a long conversation with him and Ellie Smeal and Kathy Spiller on Sunday for about an hour and a half. And what came about in that conversation, and it was quite chilling, is that this is really just part one. Overturning Roe is not the goal. The goal is a nationwide ban on abortion. And, immediately after the Alito opinion came down, and I'm sure you saw this in the headlines, a bunch of the anti-abortion movement people said, oh, we're going to introduce legislation in Congress to ban abortion. Now that there'll be no Roe, we can do that, right? Well, maybe not. I mean, if they do, they first of all have to get majorities in both houses. I have no illusion that they would drop the filibuster in a half a second to pass a nationwide abortion ban, unlike the Democrats haven't been able to do that. But Biden will veto it, at least for the next 2 years. I think that possibility of a nationwide ban, legislative ban, will only happen if the Democrats lose all three, the trifecta, the presidency, the Senate, and the House, which could happen. But, whatever. But actually, what Chemerinsky thinks is a much more possible and likely scenario in the less distant future is that that the Supreme Court will rule that fetuses or unborn children. So let me just say where this comes from. So Alito's opinion uses the phrase unborn children. Actually, I should figure out how many times. A lot, right? And he specifically says that he disagrees with Roe, which said that fetuses aren't protected by the Constitution. And this has been a long-term goal of the anti-abortion movement, fetal personhood. And I think what's much more likely, and Erwin thought this, is that the Supreme Court will strike down the laws in states like Massachusetts and California and New York as a violation of the federal Constitution. So in other words, we'll get a nationwide ban by the court saying that states are not allowed to allow abortion. And under the 14th Amendment equal protection, that fetuses have equal rights to pregnant people. And then they'll weigh those rights and they'll say, well, it'll kill a fetus, but it won't kill her. So therefore the fetus's rights can trump the woman's rights, the pregnant person's rights. And therefore these laws need to be, women aren't protected by the Constitution. I mean, yes, I think that they would say, well, yeah, they are. But when you're weighing these conflicting rights of the fetal person and the pregnant person, and the fetal life is at issue and the pregnant person's life may or may not be at issue. I mean, they don't really pay attention to the nation's astronomical maternal mortality and morbidity rate, particularly of Black women. They'll say the fetus wins is basically, I think. And again, this is what he thinks the current Supreme Court will do. I agree. I think forced pregnancy violates human rights. And actually, I think it's a form of involuntary servitude. And I just had a piece go up at Ms., and I'll drop this in the box, where I make this argument. I intentionally don't use the word slavery because I think that is problematic, but the 13th Amendment prohibits involuntary servitude. And I argue in the piece I just popped in the box that forcing somebody to do the labor of pregnancy and childbirth is a form of involuntary servitude, where you're forcing one person to, in essence, work for another person in violation of the Constitution. That's not an argument that's ever really been argued before the court or gotten anywhere, but I think that, I'll get to the abortion underground in just a second, Lynn. Yeah. So that is the chilling potential future to think about the Alito decision is just the warm up, or the court overturning Roe as step one. And it's very clear that's the goal of the anti-abortion movement. So the other thing I want to talk about the decision, before I go to Lynn's point about the underground abortion movement, which is vibrant, and I've written extensively on this and spoken to tons of people across the country for Ms., the threat to other rights. So it's very clear that the Alito decision, and again, we don't know that's going to be the final decision, but it's very clear that that decision endangers not just the right to abortion, but certainly the right to post-conception contraception, like IUDs and Plan B. Which actually Plan B is not necessarily post-conception contraception, but those two versions of contraception, the IUD and Plan B, the anti-abortion movement and many people in it clearly believe that that's an abortifacient, that it prevents a fertilized egg from implanting in the wall of the uterus, and therefore it is abortion in the sense, or it ends a human life, which is a zygote or embryo, and that therefore that would have to be banned. And under the reasoning of the Alito opinion, absolutely. So what Irwin says is, if a state decided to ban IUDs and Plan B, and that went up to the Supreme Court, that this court absolutely would uphold a ban like that, with no doubt in his mind. Even though the science is very questionable, particularly about Plan B, as to whether it has that effect. I mean, it's not an abortion, because medically an abortion is only once a pregnancy is established, and it's only established once it's implanted in the uterine wall. And an IUD and Plan B, if it's implanted in the uterine wall, will not end the pregnancy. So that's sort of technical stuff. But I grilled Irwin about the issue of, what about hormonal contraception, or, like things that are not in that category, that like the Hobby Lobby case was about, right? When Hobby Lobby wanted to not cover under the ACA contraception mandate, Plan B and IUDs. He thinks that it's very likely the court would uphold a contraceptive ban. He doesn't think actually a state is likely to ban contraception wholesale, which actually I think that is possible, because if you look at the rhetoric of the anti-abortion movement, you go to the website, The Pill Kills. It's a website, it's an anti-abortion website that makes the argument that all hormonal contraception kills a fertilized egg. And so I'm less, I think they very well could. He definitely thinks it would, if a state wanted to ban IVF, in vitro fertilization, that the Alito perspective would totally uphold a ban on that. But he also called into question, he also thinks the decision threatens a much wider range of rights that are based in the right to privacy, particularly the bodily autonomy side of the right to privacy. Things like the Lawrence versus Texas decision, which struck down the Texas sodomy ban. He thinks that that's very endangered, and that this court would absolutely overturn not only that, but same-sex marriage. The right to procreate, he thinks, is endangered. The right to custody of your children, he thinks, is endangered. The right to keep your family together. And all of those things are based in the right to privacy and the right to be free from governmental interference in private family decisions. And, we already have a state that's absolutely willing to interfere into particularly families of color, to take children away. But he thinks that this decision will give the state even more power to decide who's a good parent and a bad parent. So like one scenario I could totally see is if a state wants to take children away from gay parents. I think that Irwin thinks that this court and this decision could allow that, could approve a law like that. Well, I don't know that a state would do that. I mean, I know there's plenty of people in the anti-abortion movement that would do that, would want to do that. I don't know that a state would actually do that, but he thinks that it would hold that. He also, by the way, going back to this issue of precedent, he thinks that their complete disregard for precedent makes it even more certain than it already was that the court's going to get rid of affirmative action and is going to allow prayer in public schools, which are two long-term goals of the right-wing movement. Matter of fact, there's two cases that are going to be argued in October on affirmative action. And he said in the legal community, people are very confident the court's going to get rid of affirmative action. So that's something else that to sort of keep on your radar screen as far as this decision. And I know I'm going to wrap up soon because I want to leave lots of time for questions. But I want to say a little bit about post-Roe. So in my writing and in my talks, I'm making the argument that post-Roe is not going to look like pre-Roe. And let me explain that because I kind of have a two-part argument. Post-Roe is not going to look like pre-Roe medically. Because pre-Roe, we had emergency rooms packed with bleeding and septic women who have tried to get abortions on their own or, illegal abortions and ended up hemorrhaging or with an infection and had to go to emergency rooms to get antibiotics and transfusions. And if you know anything about the history of the movement and you hear doctors talk about it, and I have all sorts of sources on all of this. I'm a teacher. And so if you are curious, I can provide you with sources. That's not going to happen post-Roe because of two things: the internet and the abortion pill. There was not an abortion pill pre-Roe. The abortion pill was invented in 1980 in France. And it is now used across the world in nations where abortion is illegal. And as a result, death rates from illegal abortion have dropped precipitously across the world. And I believe that here in the United States, that if we can get our underground network sufficiently developed, that we will be, it will not look like pre-Roe here in the United States. And I'll talk a little bit about that underground network, which I have studied very closely, in a second. The second thing, though, about pre-Roe versus post-Roe, pre-Roe, we did not have mass incarceration. We did not have the sprawling criminal justice complex that we have now. We didn't have police departments with military-grade technology and weapons. We didn't have a private prison industry looking to lock up more and more people to make money on the open market. And so while I think that illegal abortion or abortion outside of the medical system will be as medically dangerous as it was pre-Roe, I think it will be much more legally dangerous. And I just finished a piece, which is going to be in the Daily Hampshire Gazette here in Northampton, about digital surveillance of pregnant people and people that help them, and the kinds of tools that the criminal justice system has today that they didn't have pre-Roe. And actually, the piece is based on a report that just came out by an organization. I think I still have it on my computer, a New York-based privacy organization. I'll drop it in the box in a second, about the kinds of technologies that are already being used to trace and track pregnant people and people searching the internet for abortion pills or other things. Things like geofencing, where you can figure out if anybody physically goes near an abortion clinic with their phone. Warrants, digital warrants, where you can like order Google to produce who put in certain search terms and in a certain time period. So digital warrants, data mining, and data banks. And, obviously police are restricted by the Fourth Amendment, which the search and seizure clause, which says they have to have probable cause to issue a warrant for digital data. That said, a lot of these things are available in databases that already exist from commercial companies, and my piece links all this stuff, and the report does. So basically, I think we just live in a very different world. And actually, let me just quickly just give you a couple quotes from this piece that I just published, because it's kind of stunning. So these are quotes from the report. Every aspect of pregnant people's digital lives will be put under the microscope, examined for any hints that they sought, or successful or otherwise, to end their pregnancy. They say, suddenly every phone, laptop, and smart device will become a potential policing tool, with pregnant people's location data and search histories mined for evidence. Even when abortion bans stop at the state line, the surveillance will be national, giving anti-abortion police a way to track down abortion care coast to coast. Even if the laws are the same as pre-Roe, the way they're enforced will be starkly different. So I think that's something that we need to, and already we know, right? Pregnant people who miscarry, experience stillbirths, or search for abortion pill lines have already been criminally arrested, investigated. I mean, Lizelle Herrera, right? Just in Texas last month, I wrote a couple stories on that case, where she ended up in an emergency room, and then they charged her with murder. And so I can talk more about that if you want. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the underground abortion movement. So the abortion pill exists, the internet exists, the USPS exists. And there is a robust and growing network of resources for people who need to self-source abortion pills because they live in states where abortion is illegal or otherwise inaccessible. And one of the primary sources I like to share with people is the organization Plan C, and their website is plancpills.org. I think that I am going to very quickly, can I share my screen? Share my screen with you and just show you their plan, their guide to finding abortion pills. They have this really handy dandy guide, and it's any state. So you can just do a search. So if you go up here to find pills and see this, select a state or territory. So let's just see what's available in Texas, right? We know Texas is one of the worst. So there's not going to be a lot available. But let's see what they do. So it gives you a warning. This is illegal, and they restrict telehealth medicine. So they give all of their information, tells you, is this green light, totally legal, yellow light, not really. Although I will say Texas does not criminalize people for using abortion pills or ordering them, despite what happened to Lizelle Herrera. Shortly after the prosecutor got called out, they dropped the charges because it's not against the law. But the first is this organization, Aid Access, which is an amazing organization run by Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, who's a Dutch physician. Aid Access is based in Austria, and they provide abortion pills to people in all 50 states for a sliding scale fee of $105. The downside is it takes 14 to 21 days to get the pills, although she does prescribe them in advance. So if you want to just have them in your medicine cabinet, which I strongly recommend people do, it is available. And so I interviewed her. I did an in-depth interview with her for Ms. She opened Aid Access in 2018 when she started just getting tons of requests from U.S. people. She had historically only functioned through Women Help Women in nations that banned abortion, but she started to get so many calls or contacts from the U.S. that she created Aid Access in 2018. Since then, she's mailed abortion pills to 30,000 people in the United States. 30,000 people. And that this was when I interviewed her like a couple months ago. And it was the first 4 years. I'm sure it's more now. And I mean, she got inundated when the Alito opinion came down. And so, and the other thing that's great is that so that she had 30,000 pills she sent to people, 1/3 of those got the pills for a free or reduced rate. She's absolutely prepared to send people pills for free. And she has her economic, first of all, she's not trying to make money. Second of all, she has it set up so that the people who pay the full fee are funding the people that can't pay. And this is huge. And basically what you do is you do an online consultation. So you fill out a form. It doesn't take long. She reviews the form to make sure you're eligible. And if you are, then she mails you the pills. Now, I want to just say briefly, abortion pills are safer than Tylenol. The only reason they're so restricted in the US is because of the anti-abortion movement. And they're very, very easy to use. And this underground network has resources like the M&A hotline, that's short for miscarriage and abortion hotline, which is staffed by medical professionals, doctors, nurses, and midwives who are available 20 hours a day to give medical advice and care for people self-managing or self-sourcing pills and using them on their own. Aid Access does send all sorts of information with the pills, but if you're anxious, like after you've started using them, you can call the M&A hotline and get help. And I also did an in-depth interview with the medical director of the M&A hotline, if you're interested. So organizations like Aid Access, Plan C, and M&A hotline are part of that network that's built and is growing to support people to self-manage post-Roe. The other important piece of that network is an organization called If, When, How, who has created a repro legal helpline where people can call with legal questions if you're worried about the legality of ordering pills online. And also they have a repro legal defense fund, which is the organization that posted the $500,000 bail for Lizelle Herrera in Texas to get her out of jail until her charges were dropped. So there are legal resources as well. In addition, Plan C has vetted a bunch of online websites that sell abortion pills without a prescription or without a doctor's involvement. And it says the cost, how long it takes to get there, who it's available to. And it really varies, like Abortion RX, $239 for 8 days. They ordered the pills and then they tested them in the laboratory. These are all legit pills. And they vary. And, like the reason there's this one for $470, the reason it's so high, I ordered this one because I do research with Plan C. It was because I got it like overnight. I ordered it on a Friday and it came on a Monday. So you can get these meds quick. They're just more expensive because of international overnight delivery. Another thing people are doing is using mail forward. So they use a telehealth doctor in another state and then have it mailed to a state that allows telehealth and then to an iPostal box and then forwarded to them in the state that doesn't allow it. So again, there's a lot of information about how to get an abortion, even in states where it's illegal. Now, the drawback is abortion pills are only recommended for the first, well, the FDA says the first 10 weeks. The World Health Organization says that the first 13 weeks. After 13 weeks, it's a slightly different pill regimen. So that's an issue. You can actually use it late into pregnancy, but it gets more difficult, and you end up having fetal remains that can, that is an issue. But and by the way, just very quickly, and I promise this is the last thing I'll say, abortion pills are 2 pills: mifepristone, which blocks progesterone, which is the hormone that maintains a pregnancy. And once you take mifepristone, the pregnancy ends and begins to shed. The second pill is misoprostol, which is approved by the FDA for ulcers. It's a widely available medication available in pharmacies. You take misoprostol and it causes uterine contractions and expels the contents of the uterus. That's what abortion pills are. Now, you can use just misoprostol. It's a little bit more difficult process, but you can. And misoprostol is available over the counter in Mexico and in many countries. And it's much more easy to get. Actually, if your dog has arthritis, probably what your vet gives the dog is misoprostol. And it's the exact same thing you can get from the doctor. Yes. So that's, and there are organizations like Susan Yanow in Boston, who has the organization SAS, Self-Managed Abortion Safe and Supported, which trains people to talk about abortion pills and how to use them in a legally safe way, in a medically accurate way. So there's that network it's a train the trainer model, and it's trying to get the word out about abortion pills. And there's also underground movements doing aspiration abortion, it's much more legally dangerous because you're actually doing something versus just sharing information, which is protected by the First Amendment. But it is definitely happening. It's happened ever since Roe. It never ended. I mean, it happened pre-Roe. It never ended. There was always this underground network, but it's growing in leaps and bounds because of what's happening in the country. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I could always say a lot more, but I won't. And I'd love to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. Debbie Hart Klein is going to be managing the questions, and we have many that have come in the chat box. And thank you for answering some of them as they came in. Well done.
Yeah.
Thanks. So there's a couple questions about the constitutionality of some of the laws that we're anticipating. One is penalizing women for crossing state, going to other states for treatments. And another is about the mailing or receipt of these abortion pills across state lines.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as the punishing people for leaving the state. So, and this came up in my conversation with Erwin, who again is a leading constitutional scholar. There is a right to travel, to move from one state to another, but that doesn't, so a law like the proposed, I think it was Missouri or Minnesota, I think it was Missouri, said, oh, we're going to keep people from leaving the state. That is clearly unconstitutional. But what is not is you go to the state, you get your abortion, you come back in, and then they arrest you for what you did in the other state. That would be harder. That would be less clearly unconstitutional because they're not preventing you from travel. They're just punishing you if you do travel. But that's a less clear constitutional violation. But just saying you can't leave the state, it's a clear constitutional violation. I think it's more likely that what states will do is when they find out there's a pregnant woman, particularly if they think she might be going out of the state, that they would detain her. And that's already happened, where women have been detained. Alicia Bell, no, wait, what was her name? I can provide it, but there was a woman who her doctor wanted her to take she had had a drug addiction, and they wanted to have her take a drug to deal with a drug addiction, but she was no longer addicted. And so she refused to take the drug. So they sent the cops after her, and the police arrested her and detained her in a hospital basically for 80 days against her will. And I think that kind of thing is more likely, that they will just detain pregnant women under the auspices of something other than trying to prevent her from traveling. But that, I think that's possible. The other questions about the legality of ordering pills. So, people order prescription medications all the time from abroad because they're so damn expensive here in the United States, right? People do this all the time. They order pills from abroad. And the FDA knows this. And the FDA basically has a policy of, we don't like it. We don't think you should be doing it. The pills may not have been produced in FDA approved facilities, yada, yada, yada. But they have a policy of non-enforcement. They're not going to do anything about it. And I mean, they don't have criminal enforcement powers anyway, but so they don't have any power. 3 states criminalize self-managed abortion. Those states are South Carolina, Nevada, and Oklahoma, I believe. But the rest don't. And most states, like all these abortion bans, like even the bounty hunter laws, all of them exempt pregnant people from criminal prosecution or civil prosecution, because that has been a political strategy that the antis have used to get these laws passed. Because it's a lot less politically popular to say, we're going to arrest women and throw them in jail for having abortions. Remember when Trump did that during the campaign, and everybody's like, oh, damn, he said that out loud. Do you remember that? when he was like, somebody said, well, what do you think should happen to pregnant women when they get abortions? And he said, we should throw them in jail. And the whole, you could hear the entire anti-abortion movement cringe, except for one little fringe, because their whole thing is, we're all about helping women and protecting women. It's the evil abortion doctors that are the bad guys. And so that's been their modus operandi. But what I argue in the piece that's going to go up on Thursday about surveillance is that they're going to drop that strategy as soon as Roe is overturned, and they can do it, because I think they want to, and they're already criminalizing. I mean, look at Lizelle Herrera. There's a report by National Advocates for Pregnant Women, Lynn Paltrow, who documented criminal prosecution of pregnant women and women who got abortions. The piece is called The New Jane Crow. And if you Google that, you'll find it, Lynn Paltrow. And she did like this deep dive analysis of how many pregnant people have been prosecuted over the last 20 years for behaviors during their pregnancy and miscarriages and stillbirths. And, and she came up with, she got about 600 cases, and she thinks that's a huge undercount. And so already they're criminally prosecuting women for things they do including for abortion. But, it's not explicitly criminalized. Usually it's prosecutors misusing laws that weren't intended to criminalize pregnant people, like feticide laws, which usually explicitly exempt pregnant people or an abortion, or like child neglect laws, or distributing drugs to a minor. That's a big one, right? A law prohibits distributing drugs to a minor, and they'll charge a pregnant woman because she smoked pot while she was pregnant or something. So that's kind of where we are right now. But If When How has a report that specifically goes into this issue, and you can call their Repro Legal Helpline if you have particular questions on, you can be putting yourself at legal risk. But again, and there, by the way, there's strategies to protect yourself. If you are searching online for abortion pills, use incognito or a VPN, a virtual private network. Pay with cash if at all possible, or better yet, cryptocurrency, because then they can't track that you've paid for it. So there are strategies, and the STOP report that I just wrote this piece on has some of those strategies in it if you want to look at it.
So there are definitely a lot of questions, and there's been a lot of discussion about the laws, but if we can circle back to the Supreme Court, this anticipation that they're going to be coming out with similar opinions across the board with all types of rights, what do you think the solution is for that? And do you think the only thing is to expand the court?
Well, the solution is we've got to elect more Democrats. And there's no way the court will be expanded with our current political situation. Biden hasn't even come out in favor of that. And we're never going to get over the filibuster. The only way to do that, yes, I think we need to expand the court, and the only way we're going to do that is to to get 50 solid Democrats that will vote to put aside the filibuster and maintain our majority in the House, and then do a lot of this. I mean, WIPA, the Women's Health Protection Act, got voted on shortly after the Alito opinion, and it only had 48 Democrats. Right. Not only would what's his name, Sinema and Manchin not vote to overcome the filibuster, they wouldn't even vote for WIPA. So we need to get 50 solid real Democrats and do that. I don't even know, though, with that we could get 50. We need 50 Democrats that are willing to expand the court. I wrote a piece about expanding the court as well, and I definitely think we need to do that. But I also think we need to, we've been looking to the court too long for rights. I think we need to particularly focus on the state levels and get vast majorities like we have here in Massachusetts to pass better laws. And then, unfortunately, in the conservative states, I just think we need to go to the grassroots and organize. Do what Stacey did in Georgia. I haven't heard the results yet from today. I don't know that they're out, but I mean, she's just amazing. I mean, that she flipped Georgia. I mean, we need a Stacey Abrams in every damn state. So I would, I think I think we need, I'm a lawyer, and I grew up on thinking, sue, go to the Supreme Court, win rights. And obviously it's been tremendously successful in so many ways, but it seems very clear the current court is absolutely willing to overturn the last 50 years of rights that we've established. And that's the goal of the Republicans, is they did not like the civil rights movement, they did not like the women's movement, and they certainly didn't like the gay rights movement, and they want to entirely overturn the legacy of those three movements. It goes back to Reagan gutting EEOC with Clarence Thomas. I mean, I just think we can't rely on the courts anymore.
So there's a question about the Equal Rights Amendment, and if you have any thoughts about why the archivist hasn't certified that.
So this is one of my beats. I'm so down on the ERA. It's a long story, and we don't have much time. And maybe I can drop something or go look at my articles. But basically, it's fully ratified. It is part of the Constitution, but the Trump administration blocked the last ministerial task required by statute to make it recognized, which is the archivist has to certify that 38 states have ratified and then publish it in the Federal Register. And the stupid archivist decided that, I'll ask Bill Barr what he thinks, which is like, what Bill Barr thinks. And so he did that, and Bill Barr said, no, not legitimate. We can't do this. And then he abided by that. He's since stepped down. Biden's going to appoint a new one. But what we need to do is get rid of the filibuster and pass the Senate. So the House has already passed a resolution saying the ERA has been validly ratified, and we need that in the Senate, and that's pending, and there's going to be a vote in the next probably month or so on that. But without the filibuster, the Republicans are not going to let that go by. And so again, this is another reason why we need 50 solid Democrats. It's Manchin and Sinema again who won't vote to lift the filibuster for the ERA, and so we don't have the ERA. I actually think we need the ERA, particularly with this current Supreme Court, which is rolling back women's rights left and right. And I think we need the ERA. I think it's a powerful tool. It authorizes Congress to act on behalf of women's rights. It's not perfect. I do think it will cover LGBTQ people as well as cisgender women. But that's actually, I think, where we are. And again, I've done a ton of coverage on this for Ms. And so, I'll drop a link in the box. So you can get into the details of that if you're interested by going to my articles on that.
Great, thank you. We'd love to have you continue answering questions. We have more in the chat box, so maybe what we can do is send them to you. Would you mind answering them, and we can email them out with all the links you've shared?
Absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. Amazing having you here. Horrible topic that we have to discuss now. It feels like we're going backwards completely.
We are.
However, we have to think going forward. I agree totally. We have to get rid of the filibuster. It means electing more Democrats into the Senate. It also means working locally to do whatever we can to elect progressive politicians around, not just in Massachusetts, but all over. And then legislation. So with that said, I turn it over to Carolyn Kimball Katz. She is here from Planned Parenthood, and she is the Associate Director of Communications, and she has been a longtime resident of Massachusetts, and she has been involved personally and professionally in Democratic politics and organizing since 2012. So thank you very much, Carolyn, for making time to come and speak with us.
Thank you, Deb. And Carrie, I cannot say enough how grateful I am to have sat through that entire presentation talk you gave. I know I don't know you. For folks on the call, Carrie wears, I think, a million hats, including one with Planned Parenthood. And I'm very grateful to you for delivering all of that message that I think was really important to hear, the national landscape, as well as, what that might mean for Massachusetts. I'm gonna take just a couple minutes to kind of share out what we on the ground here in Massachusetts are kind of saying about what we can do locally. I think everyone on this call probably knows abortion is and will remain legal here in Massachusetts. That is like the number 1, 2, and 3 message that Planned Parenthood is sending out in this moment, because it is really, really important that folks do understand that right off the bat. There's so much mis and disinformation that we know is already happening, right? It's not just coming with the decision. So that is the number 1 message, but that is also really, really, credit to a lot of folks I'm sure on this call who had a role in advocating to pass the Roe Act in 2020, and who will, kind of take up the cause again to expand abortion access here in the Commonwealth. And what I'm going to share, I think I can share my screen because maybe it's helpful for folks to see, but I'm first just going to drop a link in the chat to what the former Roe Coalition, now Beyond Roe Coalition, is kind of putting together and have launched an agenda for abortion access and reproductive equity in a post-Roe world, right? So let me try to share my screen just with this tab right here. See if this works.
That's good. We can see it.
Caroline, you're muted.
Thank you. I think it muted when I shared my screen. So this is the kind of what we're saying is the launchpad agenda for the new, our new coalition that came out of the incredible work that folks put in to pass the Roe Act. And we're looking beyond Roe at this point, right? We have to know that that is coming. And what does beyond Roe look like for Massachusetts? And I can't stress enough, I think everyone on this call knows, yes, we need to be thinking nationally and looking nationally and electing folks in other states and passing, doing whatever we can to protect folks in states that are about to lose access to abortion care immediately. But we're trying to be, I think, strategic and, do what we can and look at what role do we play as folks in Massachusetts to not only expand access, but be a model, frankly, for the rest of the country and what is possible. It is possible to protect and expand abortion access and to legislate true reproductive freedom and reproductive equity here in the Commonwealth and be a model to other states to do the same. So that is what this agenda is laying the groundwork for, that we are so excited about and certainly want everyone on this call to be engaged and active in. So I'm just going to go through it very fast because there's a lot more to kind of read, but I want folks to have just the initial vocabulary for what we're talking about. Of course, number 1 on this agenda, we have protected abortion rights here in Massachusetts. It's obviously not enough. We have to expand access to abortion reproductive health care. And we've laid out several solutions to doing that. And I will stress there are a couple points here. You can click on these little plus signs to kind of expand for a brief overview of them that actually are correlated to existing legislation that is in motion at the State House. I'm sure folks are already aware of some of this, if not all of them. But if you're wondering what is literally possibly moving right now that we can be calling our reps and our senators for and fighting for, we've articulated bill numbers where there is an existing bill in motion and that we want folks to kind of be paying attention to. As a sidebar, I think folks on this call may know the Senate and the House are going through their own budget processes literally as we speak. The Senate is working on some budget amendments to be voted on later this week. So some of this might get kind of looped into that. And we're watching that language closely to see which pieces of this agenda they've been able to, I think, be nimble with and respond proactively in this moment to include possibly some more investments and other pieces of this agenda into the budget, since that is the most immediate action being taken at the state legislature right now. So I don't think I'm not going to go over every single one because I know we're short on time, but I wanted folks to see the big bucket items. So expanding abortion access and ensuring true reproductive equity in the Commonwealth, supporting our providers and patients. I've seen that in the chat a lot. This is obviously going to be critical when, as other states kind of threaten to, chill access beyond their borders within their states. What does that mean for Massachusetts? I will say that there are no existing bill numbers listed on this yet. There's some language, and we're trying to be really specific on exactly what we mean when we say protect providers, right? Privacy of providers, patients, licenses, defending folks, or proactively making sure that our providers will not be inundated with lawsuits and everything. Carrie, I know, could speak to that better than I could. But there's an intentionality around not having a bill number on here yet. I saw in the chat someone mentioned the Connecticut law, and I want to assure folks as best I can, which I don't know if that's very well, that our legislative teams and folks, I think, at the in the legislature, in the AG's office, et cetera, have been kind of workshopping what we think the best path forward for a similar bill in Massachusetts can be. It is not going to replicate that one, just given some of the issues I know some of the folks on the legislative side have seen. But we want to introduce something that we know will work and will pave the right path forward for this in Massachusetts. And so that's definitely a priority. The formal legislation has not been filed yet, but we wanted to kind of put that flag right in the ground with these kind of value statements that we know we're going to be fighting for and working on. And then the major other category is, of course, just like being able to articulate and identify the gaps, the problem, where are the gaps in service, how do we ensure folks who live in places in Massachusetts where there are such access deserts have access to resources, to information about services, can understand the dangers of crisis pregnancy centers. We know, sadly, that crisis pregnancy centers who are not legitimate reproductive health clinics and are anti-abortion in their agenda actually outnumber legitimate licensed abortion providers in Massachusetts 3-1, which I remain shocked that that is true, even here. And so we're reminding folks, yes, even here in Massachusetts, where the right to abortion, of course, is protected, and we worked hard to make sure that happens, access is not guaranteed. And there are certain communities, I think, that are especially vulnerable to mis and disinformation that the anti kind of movement is kind of working through, with whether it's with their CPCs or otherwise. So we want to really invest and pay attention to what we can do proactively to kind of limit and combat that. So that's our kind of third category. And again, what we're excited about with this agenda is it's very much a launch pad for what we can do here in Massachusetts to continue to truly be a national leader in access. As we know what's coming, it is not final by any means, and we're so excited to kind of work with the folks on this call, who I'm sure also wear many hats, whether you are an activist in your own right, part of an organization that wants to be a part of the Beyond Roe Coalition. We're going to be doing a lot more to continue to engage partners to inform this agenda, build on it, and definitely mobilize folks to kind of start moving these initiatives forward, whether they're legislative, budget, or an organizing lift, and or otherwise. So I'm really grateful for the time, Deb. I'm happy to stick around for a minute or two if you need me, if you want to answer any questions, but the link is in the chat, and there's an option to add your name, sign on, so that we can keep anyone who does that in close contact on any additions to the agenda, kind of new phases and action days, lobby days, everything like that. So I'll pause there.
Great, thank you. So we will be sending out an email with all the links that have been shared to articles, to websites, and to the toolkits, and especially to your organization. So we'll be in touch, and we can show up for actions, which is exactly what Indivisibles do. We work to get things done. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Carolyn and Carrie. Wonderful to have you both share your information and knowledge with us. It is 8:07. I thank everybody for hanging in there and staying a few minutes longer. The other thing that I want to announce is next week on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. we have the open session of the Indivisible Mass Coalition Coordinating Board meeting, and we already have folks signed up to share, and one of the folks that will be coming is Carla, who will be speaking to us about the next statewide call. She's on the feminist action team of Indivisible Mass Coalition and will be sharing some future ideas for further work on this topic. So everybody's welcome to join that call, and I just shared the registration in the link registration in the chat box. The other and the last announcement I'm going to make, and then we can sign off, is on June 26th, we are having a statewide gathering of indivisibles and their allies. So Carrie and Carolyn, you're both welcome to attend. It will be from 12 to 4 at Clark University. It will be socializing, getting informed and getting energized to make sure that we can get out there and do great work through the rest of the year, especially at the campaign season, and if we have new legislation to move at the State House. With that, I have shared those links. One's an RSVP, one's a registration, and we have the toolkit that's been shared for Bands Off Our Bodies, plus the website, Carolyn, that you shared. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining. We appreciate your time. Thank you all, and keep up the great work. Thank you, Carrie, and thanks for sharing all those sites.
Staying on, Deb, I have a question for you.
Okay, I am going to stop recording.